In this tribute to Mendy Klein, I promised myself 3 things. Number 1, don't cry. Strike 1. Number 2, don't look at this table. So far, so good. Number 3, I'm going to write down my speech because that's the only way I'm going to get through it. You've heard so many things about Mendy. So the only thing I could add is a personal story. So often on Sunday mornings, when both the Kleins and the Malcmachers were both in town, I would get a call from Mendy about 11 a.m. with a simple message, "I'm picking you up," which usually meant he was already at the end of my driveway. Now, 11 a.m. on Sundays is the time that there has been a women's shir in my house for many years, given by Rebbetzin Miriam Barkin, with both Ita and Chani attend. It still goes on to this day. He'd pick me up, we'd drive over to Izzy's, without a word to the people working there. Out would come a heaping order of chili cheese fries and Diet Cokes, because we're on a diet, which is really a terrible idea when you think about it after a whole Shabbos of eating, but we were undeterred. We talked about anything and everything having to do with the latest projects of the Hebrew Academy, the Federation, the city, the kids. Mendy was working on for Klal Yisrael. And a few times we get philosophical, but one time in particular we discussed, how do we know we're doing what we should be doing? How do we know what our mission in life is? So this conversation happened a week before Rav Yitzchak Shiner, Zol Gesund Sein, one of the Gedolei Rosh Yeshiva, one of the oldest Rosh Yeshiva living, was visiting Cleveland. And Rav Yitzchak Shiner has an amazing story. He was a child from Pittsburgh who became this huge Rosh Yeshiva and very well known. It was always hosted by the Kleins. And Mendy was incredible in hosting and taking care, especially of an elder Rosh Yeshiva like this. I have a picture in my house of Mendy actually pouring milk into his cereal and serving a breakfast. So what's our mission in life? So the week before Rav Shiner comes, I told Mendy we should ask the Rosh Yeshiva when he comes, but I already know what her Rav Shiner is going to say. And I said, Mendy, he's going to tell you 3 words. Masa ish uvkudaso. These 3 words mean a man's actions and his mission. And they come from the Rosh Hashanah liturgy and the Rosh Hashanah davening in Zichronos, in remembrances, those 3 words, that God is looking on on Rosh Hashanah, God is looking on man's actions and his mission. And Mendy says, how do you know what he's going to say? I said, I'll tell you how. Because years before that, probably about 15 years before we had this discussion, I went with my good friend Gary Toger to see the Rosh Yeshiva in his sukkah in Yerushalayim on Chol Hamoed. And we asked Rav Shiner this very question. Rav Shiner told us these 3 words, Masa Ishuv Kudaso, and he explained that if you just take those 3 words, a man's actions and his mission, and you restructure the sentence, and you can have it say, Uvkudaso, and what's your mission? Masa Ish. Look at a man's actions. If you want to know what your mission in life is, look at what a person is doing, and that's his mission. So in classic Mendy fashion, Mendy looks at me and says, I'll give you $5,000 to the Hebrew Academy if that's what he says. Okay, sounds good. A week later, Rav Shiner comes to town, and he sees a lot of people, and Mendy calls me up and says, come over right now, Rav Shiner has some time, we're going to ask him that question. So I come over, we sit down, Rav Shiner's at the head of the table, me and Mendy are there, and then Mendy says, ask him the question. I said, Rosh Yeshiva, how do we know what our mission in life is? So he couldn't hold himself back, and Mendy blurts out, Masa Ishuv Kudaso. So the Rosh Yeshiva looks up and he says, I told you the vort already on that? I told you that before? Mendy points at me, he says, no, Dr. Malcmacher told me that that's what the Rosh Yeshiva is going to say. The Rosh Yeshiva gives, if you know Rav Shiner, he has this great big smile. He gives this big smile. He says, then you already know what your mission is, Mendy. Now you go do it. So I turned to the Rosh Yeshiva. I said, Rosh Yeshiva, I have a problem. He said, what's the problem? He said, I told him the deal that Mendy and I had. I said, but the Rosh Yeshiva is supposed to say the words. Mendy blurted it out already, and I want the $5,000 for the Hebrew Academy because the Vort, the Rosh Yeshiva was supposed to say. Rosh Yeshiva turns to me and says, don't worry, he's good for it. It is certainly clear to all of us what Mendy's mission was. Pure tzedakah and chesed. It was his legacy, it was his vision to ensure our future in the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland, this entire community, and for all of Klal Yisrael. And it's certainly that's something that his wife Ita and the entire family is going to continue for years to come. We'd like to ask Mrs. Ita Klein and her children to join us up on the stage for a very special presentation in tribute to Mendy's mission. This is an artist rendition, a gorgeous artist rendition of the long-standing relationship that Rav Nachum Zev Dessler Zatzal and Mendy Zatzal had together being presented to the family. A legacy of caring, perpetuating the legacy of Rav Nachum Zev Dessler Zatzal. Mr. Mendy Klein Zatzal was a pillar of the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland who cared enough to make a difference in the school, in the community, and in communities across the globe. Beis Chinuch Rav Dessler, Hebrew Academy of Cleveland, 76th Scholarship Tribute Dinner, March 10, 2019.